We are back at it with Rings of Power, which just dropped its very first teaser for Season 3 at Comic-Con. And this one has a lot of Sauron, a good deal of his ringwraiths, and the debut of the long missing in action Celeborn. And naturally, we're gonna pore over this thing to find the lore references and story clues shot by shot. Real quick, if you enjoy the world of Middle-earth, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our weekly videos diving into the lore of Tolkien's books here on Nerd of the Rings. The teaser starts off with Sauron wearing what was established last season as the Crown of Morgoth. He's walking away from the camera here, and this appears to be a scene with orcs working on either side of a path that Sauron is walking down. Here I notice the doorway appears to have steam billowing out of it. Between this and the color that we see here, I wonder if this is Sauron entering the Samath Naur. The Samath Naur, which in Sindarin means chambers of fire, is described as being a long cave with a high roof. This leads to the Cracks of Doom, the fiery fissure where Sauron would forge the One Ring. If that's the case, Sauron here could be treading the same pathway Frodo and Sam would take thousands of years later in an effort to unmake what he is about to create. In the next shot, we have what is unquestionably Mount Doom, adding further fuel to the previous theory. We see some kind of structure in the foreground here, and the smart bet is this being the early stages of Barad-dûr, Sauron's fortress. Next, we see molten gold being lifted and poured into a mold. Again, little question here that what we are seeing is the One Ring being forged. The mold has the ringverse set in a circle with many of the characters leading to the center, where the One Ring will undoubtedly be cast. I gotta say, my first thought was, wow, they're using way more metal than they need to with this crazy mold. But as we'll see in a bit, molten gold flowing through this ringverse looks pretty cool. Over this, we have Sauron's voiceover saying, "Now is the mighty hour come." Next, we see elves dancing in the forest, perhaps a bit reminiscent of how elves of Mirkwood party in the Hobbit book. Among the elves dancing, we see Galadriel and Jamie Campbell Bower's Celeborn. That's right, folks, we are finally getting Celeborn in this show. It's one of those things I've complained about over the past 2 seasons, and while I'm still very curious to see how his absence is explained, it's good he'll finally be there. And honestly, when I heard Jamie Campbell Bower was joining the show for Season 3, this is who I was hoping he'd be playing. The guy absolutely crushed it as Vecna in Stranger Things, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he does with Celeborn. I think the safe bet here is that this is a flashback of Celeborn and Galadriel. Nothing else in the teaser really conveys much happiness, and while I'm sure there will be moments, this season seems like it's going to be fairly dark. So perhaps we're seeing a joyful event in the past for this elven power couple. I think we could be seeing our first ever live-action glimpse of the realm of Doriath. I don't know if it'll necessarily be called that in the show for rights reasons, but this kingdom is famed for its involvement in the First Age tales of Turin Turambar and Beren and Luthien, and it was a major player during that time period. And Celeborn is the grandnephew of King Thingol, and thus a prince of Doriath. And indeed, Galadriel in the books meets Celeborn in Doriath, where they fall in love and are married. In the books, Galadriel and Celeborn go over the Blue Mountains and into Eriador many years before the War of Wrath. However, in the show's canon, they established in Season 1 that Galadriel lost Celeborn during that great battle at the end of the First Age, meaning they were presumably in Beleriand throughout the First Age, and a flashback would likely not be in Eriador. So my bet for now is this is Doriath. Next, we see that cool shot of molten gold moving through the ringverse in the mold, then birds flying around in Mordor. Then we see a figure from the back as the birds swirl around. Initially, I thought this was Sauron, however, he's not wearing his crown here, so I could see this being an orc or even a human servant. Either way, this is definitely giving off Saruman with the Dunlin Crebine vibes. Next, we get an orc giving us a voiceover saying how Sauron is crafting a new power. One ring to rule them all. Hey, he said the thing. Again, we see they're using practical effects orcs, which I always love to see. This guy looks creepy and wretched, and here he's standing next to Arondir. We can tell from a later shot that he's likely talking to Galadriel here. Next, we have a shot of Galadriel crying with her head on a pillow. Now, I have two theories on this one. I think perhaps something bad happens at the previously seen elven dance party. Notice she is on a very ornately decorated, likely elven pillow, but she's covered in dirt and grime. Galadriel could be grieving the loss of someone or shaken up from the experience, and Celeborn is stroking her face in an attempt to comfort her. My second theory is that this is Galadriel after Celeborn goes missing, and someone else is trying to comfort her. I can't really tell for certain if this is a male or female hand, but the big cool factor character would be if this was Melian, Queen of Doriath, who we know from the books Galadriel was very close with. Totally ridiculous side note here, because I've pored over this frame by frame, my eyes at one point saw the illusion of this being Galadriel's own hand stroking her face, which is kind of hilarious, and now you see it too. Next, we see a horseman riding through the woods, and there's little doubt we have our first glimpse here of one of the 9 ringwraiths. I'll be honest, I was very surprised to see them here. I thought Sauron enslaving men would be something that might take longer in the show's timeline. However, we know there is a time jump between seasons 2 and 3 of 5 years. In the books, we know the Nazgûl first appear around 2251 of the Second Age, centuries prior to the conclusion of the Númenor story. Now, at first I took these to be just straight up Nazgûl, but since then it's come out that they're using the term Nazgûl, meaning ring servant. And this is explained because they're not wraiths yet, and Nazgûl literally translates to ringwraith. And I gotta say, if they're gonna show a man making that transition from flesh and blood to wraith, that's something that's kind of too good to pass up. So don't be surprised if one of these guys takes their helmet or hood off at some point in the show, and we see someone stretched beyond their years into wraith form. Next, we have Galadriel and Arondir. While the former holds a blade to an orc's neck, they're all hiding from something, the presumption being the previously seen Nazgûl. The orc voiceover continues saying that Sauron has armies scouring Middle-earth as we see orcs moving through an area with some huge trees. Then we get our first look at a fell beast this season as we hear a high screech. Now, for those who don't recall, this screech is reminiscent of the screech of the Nazgûl themselves in the films. So I would imagine that this fell beast is carrying one of the 9, although I'm also curious if they're still in mannish form, how they're able to make that shrieking really loud noise. Next, we get the wizard formerly known as Stranger. Gandalf here is crouched down looking at what we see in the previous shot. Fire bursting above a large flat rock surrounded by circles of smaller rocks. Initially, I assumed this would be a human-sized rock, and this might be some scary ceremony or something, but instead, I think this could be Gandalf experimenting with his powers. And these rocks are much smaller, like the size you would casually pick up among gravel. Time will tell on that one. We get a quick shot of the evil wizard guy who has been reported to be one of the blue wizards. We'll see if we get final confirmation on that in the show later this year. He says Middle-earth will burn as Arondir looks on where a ball of fire is shooting toward a city or settlement of some kind. Best guess here, based on the siege imagery and the rough-looking landscape, this is Eriador, as Sauron is just laying waste to the entire area. We know the elves have found the area that will be Rivendell, and it does indeed come under siege during the War of Elves and Sauron, but this looks more like a city on a large hill, so I think it could be that Arondir is like scouting out some other area under attack. Next, we see an action shot of elves fighting in the woods, and a Nazgûl picks one up and is about to body slam the elf, all with one hand while riding a horse. I'm not gonna lie, this looks pretty awesome. There's some pretty strong moments for the dark side in this teaser. Next, we see Galadriel looking up at the sky, and this could be siege-related things being thrown, but I think this is her reaction to seeing the fell beast from earlier. And indeed, this is followed by a fell beast climbing down to a balcony, no doubt in Mordor at Barad-dûr, but more on that in a bit. Then we get a line from Gandalf saying, "Has it not yet occurred to you death might be the price of saving it?" Referring, of course, to Middle-earth. This felt a bit on the nose to me, to be honest. We obviously know Gandalf the Grey, this very character, sacrifices himself to defeat the Balrog. So he will indeed see the death of his bodily form in an attempt to save Middle-earth. One of my biggest criticisms of the show has been when it tries to reference Lord of the Rings too heavily. But obviously I'll see how this plays out in context before casting any final judgment on it. Next we get our first shot at the port leading to or from Númenor, followed by Pharazôn, now presumably the king of Númenor, given he's the one speaking with an elf emissary. I'm incredibly curious to see how things play out with Miriel and Pharazôn. As I've noted before, Tolkien had a few different versions of this story, and it's some interesting political intrigue if done well. At first I thought this was Gil-galad himself, as we've seen him in gold robes quite a bit. However, I don't think this is Benjamin Walker, and rather an emissary he sent to ask Númenor for aid against Sauron. Another really interesting thing I think would be if Elrond goes to Númenor. Given the history of his brother being the first king, I feel like there's a lot to play with there. Also, we see Pharazôn has his right-hand man Belzegar alongside him, and I said last season I kinda like this character as he's a good representation of just the worst of the king's men. Next we see what appears to be Galadriel on horseback being chased. I'm honestly not certain what we're seeing in this one. I guess it could be one of the Nazgûl in their pre-wraith form trying to hunt her down. I rather wonder if it's another minor character like Theo, someone who has likely aged quite a bit, both actor and character, since we last saw them. We then see Galadriel, and it looks like she just killed an orc. She turns around to see, ta-da, Celeborn. At long last, Galadriel's husband has shown up in the Rings of Power. This sure seems like Galadriel, perhaps alongside Arondir, has made her way into Mordor and found Celeborn within the prisons of Sauron. Celeborn being imprisoned by Sauron was one of the prevailing theories about his whereabouts, and this seems like pretty solid confirmation of that. Galadriel asks Celeborn where he was, to which he answers, trying to get back to you. Initially I thought they were in different attire, but I think Galadriel has the same hairstyle and does appear to have chainlink armor on. Celeborn, it seems, has added a layer of chainmail armor himself, but perhaps he slips that on during their escape. Next we see a shot of an army mostly on foot, led by Elendil. You may recall Season 2 ended with Elendil ousted from Númenor's capital and going out, likely to Andúnië, to find his son Anarion. While I initially thought this could be Númenor showing up to aid the elves, I'm not sure how the rift would be solved enough for the faithful and Kingsmen to fight side by side, and instead wonder if this is a conflict on Númenor itself between those two sides. One wildcard theory I have is that this is an army entirely of the faithful, and they'll be the ones to help the elves after Pharazôn refuses. Perhaps word of this victory will lead Pharazôn out of pride and jealousy of Elendil to launch his own attack on Mordor to take Sauron captive. I do think this is probably Anarion standing beside Elendil here. And remember, Isildur, as far as Elendil knows in Season 2, is dead. But we know he boarded a ship back to Númenor. With the 5-year time jump, will Isildur already be back? I'm very curious to see what happens with that storyline. Next up, a quick shot of Durin and Disa along with 2 other dwarves walking in a landscape shot. Can't say for certain, but this is likely their children. It's been reported their kids will be proper characters in the show, and with the time jump, they could have grown up quite a bit. Previously, we've only seen their legs sticking out of giant helmets and heard their giggles. Next, we have a shot of Elrond, who looks sad, and that's probably because he hasn't met a nice elf girl to settle down with yet. Oh, and there's also a hooded figure crouching in the background. We then get a shot of a Nazgûl drawing his sword in a doorway in Khazad-dûm, followed by 2 of these crowned figures approaching Durin, who has his axe drawn. The crowns cut a striking image, I will say, and further confirmation that we're going to be seeing human ringwraiths aside from articles in magazines is that these guys are all wearing crowns, so they're definitely all in king form a bit. The crown is more commonly associated with the Witch King specifically, so they're definitely holding on to their previous identities as kings of men, or actively in those roles. These guys with their rings are described as being great warriors and sorcerers in the books, so don't be surprised if we get early looks at things like the Black Breath and Morgul knives or Morgul wounds. Durin has his kingly crown on his head here, so he's clearly taken over rule of Khazad-dûm after his father's passing. And we hear him say, "There are no friends of Mordor here," as we also get a shot of Disa looking to camera. I'm not sure what to read from her expression here, to be honest, so let me know in the comments what you think is happening. It looks like there's other dwarves in the background, so maybe this is some of that singing to the rock stuff happening. We then see two figures riding horses through the water, and again, I couldn't quite make out the faces here, so I'm really not sure who this is. Let me know in the comments who you think this is as well. Next, we see a mimic, followed by a shot of Gandalf, who's using his staff flashlight trick. Now, a couple things. We know from the recent Empire magazine cover that Gandalf will come face to face with an Oliphant, so these shots probably do go together. The mimic looks like it may be decked out for war purposes, but the featurette that played in Hall H mentioned Gandalf riding a mimic, so he's probably about to tame this beast. What's interesting is the Mumakil are actually from Harad, not Rhûn. Indeed, the words Mumik and Mumakil are the name for Oliphants in the language of the Haradrim. While I think it would be cool for Gandalf to go to the south, a place we know he actually goes in the books, where he is known as Incanus, meaning North Spy, I'm guessing this is a case of the show just placing Oliphants in Rhûn so they can feature Oliphants. I guess we could say maybe the Easterlings and Haradrim traded and that's how a Mumik got to the east, but it's hard to say. We then see the orc from earlier saying to Galadriel, "Come with me," and they, along with Arondir, standing on some kind of cliffside. We then see a blink and you'll miss it shot of a fortress lit by lightning. Again, I think this could be the beginnings of Barad-dûr. We next see Celeborn and Galadriel likely in the dungeons of Barad-dûr, as Celeborn says, "The Dark Lord, we have to stop him." Then we get a shot of Númenorian flags. Central in the frame, we see one with the common sun motif we've seen the previous 2 seasons. The one to the lower right appears to have a leaf design, and this one in the upper right is quite interesting. It evokes the sigils Tolkien illustrated for many elves of the First Age. This doesn't immediately call to mind any specific sigil Tolkien drew in my mind, and while many would point to Feanor's sigil for having the same number of points, it's worth noting that Tolkien typically denoted the rank of the elf by the number of these points that reached the outer rim of the design. 4 points were for princes, and 6 or 8 points represented kings. Now, it's totally possible and perhaps likely that these are just original sigils to the show. As for who they could represent, that's a great question. Could it be Eärendil, from whom the Númenorians can trace their lineage? Or perhaps we're seeing elven banners mixed with Númenorian. After all, in this short sequence where we see Númenorian armies, we also get a shot of Pharazôn, who by the way is sporting some really great looking armor here, and behind him there is definitely an elf. Could it be we're seeing the Númenorians aiding the elves against Sauron here? This certainly looks like Gil-galad, notably because the blade he's holding sure looks a lot like his spear Aiglos if we compare it to images from previous seasons. We next see Galadriel fighting some orcs in what appears to be the room where she finds Celeborn. I do wonder if the dead orc we saw earlier in the trailer is the same that was asking her to join him to defeat Sauron. Now, I've gone over this in fair depth elsewhere, but I do find that while Tolkien wrestled with the theological implications of an irredeemable race later in his life, attempting to make good orcs is, in my mind, a pretty futile attempt in adaptations. And honestly, it did not work for me in season 2 of this show. Personally, I'm hoping for this all to be a ploy where the orc dude is tricking Galadriel and springs a trap once they get here. Notably absent in a lot of these scenes though is Arondir, who definitely seems to be on this journey with Galadriel. Could this be an indication that the elf with incredible acrobatics days are numbered? Next we hear Sauron say, "The shadow rises in Middle-earth," as he walks through a doorway followed by 3 of the soon-to-be Nazgûl. Again, the pointy helms strike a great tone in looking menacing and terrifying just as they should. A quick note, we do see Sauron without his crown here, so perhaps it was indeed him standing in front of the birds earlier. I also wonder what we'll get when it comes to Sauron, the ringwraiths, and the fell beasts. In The Return of the King, we're told that Sauron bred this untimely brood that was apt to evil, and he took it and nursed it with fell meats until it grew beyond the measure of all other things that fly. It could be quite interesting to see the origin of these super creepy steeds. Speaking of which, that same passage in the books talks about the fell beast being given to his servant to be his steed, which I wonder if that's what we're seeing here. Sauron potentially revealing the fell beast to the Nazgûl for the first time. This shot also has me wondering if we won't actually see all 9 Nazgûl serving Sauron this season. We are told that 3 of the ringwraiths were from Númenor, so I could see those still being TBD. It was also revealed recently that we're getting Khamûl the Easterling in this show, and the promo image showed him in fully human form. Khamûl, while certainly in The Lord of the Rings, is only named in Unfinished Tales, so there's definitely been some additional rights negotiated from the Tolkien estate, even if it does just ending up being for this particular name. We get a quick shot of Galadriel and Celeborn smoochy kissing, then we see Sauron delivering his line. As for who he could be talking to, well, we can go further in depth on this topic later, but during the Hall H panel, a featurette was played revealing Sauron will come face to face with the balrog. Not only that, but the balrog will have dialogue. I imagine this is going to be a pretty popular question, as the balrog has no lines in either the Lord of the Rings books or films. Personally, I think there's no issue whatsoever lore-wise with a balrog being capable of speech. In the Silmarillion, we see Gothmog serving as a lieutenant of Morgoth, leading entire armies. Durin's Bane himself casts a counterspell against Gandalf in the Chamber of Mazarbul. We are talking about Maiar here, among the highest beings in all Arda. There's no reason to think they couldn't speak. As for what they'll say to each other or what deal will be struck, who can really say? Sauron and the Balrog teaming up is one of the great what-ifs of Middle-earth. And while this might be the thing from Hall H that feels most like the common critique of some franchises smashing toys together, so to speak, I gotta admit, Sauron face-to-face with Durin's Bane definitely is something that's attention-grabbing, and it's a great what-if. Now the big question is, how will this come across? Can this interaction be full of the gravitas of ancient beings? Or will it fall short and come off as kinda hokey? Only time will tell. Back to the trailer, we see Círdan, who has his beard back. I was really bummed when he shaved it off in Season 2, and I'm glad to see him rocking the facial hair once again. Ben Daniels absolutely was awesome as Círdan in Season 2, and the guy just absolutely exudes ancient elven wisdom, so getting more of him would be great. And we do see Círdan armored up here. If you recall from the books, it is Círdan, along with Elrond, who encourages Isildur to destroy the ring in the War of the Last Alliance, so he's definitely no stranger to the battlefield. Next, we see an eagle flying among the snowy mountains, followed by the black and white horses from earlier with Mount Doom in the far background. Then we get a Nazgûl on horseback as his horse rears up on its hind legs and there's just dead bodies everywhere around him. Sauron then finishes his previous line with, "How would you like to rise with it?" meaning the shadow. Now this could be Sauron talking to the Balrog, but it also could very well be him pitching a ring to some king of men. Maybe even Khamûl. Next we see what I can only assume is a Mordorian toolbox, which has the Hammer of Feanor inside. Now, I mentioned this way back in Season 1 and doubled down in Season 2 that I thought it would be pretty awesome if Sauron used Feanor's hammer in the process of making the One Ring. And sure enough, we see Sauron, presumably in the heart of Mount Doom, raising this very hammer. The lava bursts up as Sauron and some of his servants stand upon the precipice at the cracks of Doom. And we see here there's a large anvil right behind Sauron. What we don't see is the big mold from earlier in the teaser. So perhaps that was an earlier attempt at the One Ring, or maybe his servants will be bringing that in. Another quick shot of Charlie Vickers Sauron holding up Feanor's hammer. And just real quick, I gotta say, this guy has unquestionably been a huge bright spot for the show, and I'm excited to see what he does with Sauron in Season 3. I wasn't a big fan of Halbrand in Season 1, especially because of the whole secret identity and the implied romance with Galadriel. However, his Anatar in Season 2 was really strong, And I think he's just got some great acting chops to do cool things with a fully evil and ready to dominate all life version of Sauron. And then we have the final shot of the teaser, a pair of tongs in front of Sauron's face holding a single golden ring. The ruling ring. The one ring to rule them all. We then see the ring rotating among a background of flame as the title card appears, and we get the release date of November 11th of this year. As you guys who've watched my channel know, I haven't shied away from criticizing this show over the past 2 seasons, and there's a couple things here that I'm leery of. But credit where it's due, this is a solid teaser. As most teasers are, it's not the thickest on plot. We know Sauron is trying to make the One Ring, his armies are wreaking havoc, that Galadriel and Celeborn reunite, and that the Númenóreans do something. That being said, a teaser isn't really meant to be super plot heavy. It's just there to build that initial hype, and I think this one does that pretty well. The highlights for me are definitely Sauron with the One Ring and the mortal men doomed to become ringwraiths. And for years now, I've been saying this show, and the character of Galadriel in particular, needs Celeborn, so that her character can perhaps course correct a bit, and hopefully come across less petulant than she did, especially in Season 1. And hey, there was not even a single Harfoot in this entire teaser. That is a massive win in my book, as anyone who watched my coverage will tell you. I would personally love it if we didn't bother with the Harfoots this season, and that they were able to put more of that focus on the elves, Númenor, and their combined struggle against Sauron. So for me personally, I think this is probably the highest my just general interest / excitement level has been since that very first teaser of Season 1, when we were just all bright-eyed with wonder about what this show would be. Rings of Power Season 3 seems to be playing in some very significant lore areas that could have been in much earlier, even from the start of the show, and I'm legit excited to dive into things like the Nazgûl and their transformation. We'll obviously have much more time and much more to chat about in these coming months, and a proper full trailer later on will give us a better indication of how the season is shaping up. One of my other criticisms in the past has been the uneven quality of the writing. So that's still a question mark to see how that develops in Season 3 and if they can improve from the previous seasons. But like I said, just pure vibes and piquing my interest, this teaser has me the most excited I've been for this show since those early days. Leaning into Sauron and the Nazgûl, and debuting Celeborn was definitely a smart move for this first teaser. But for now, we will wait and see if Rings of Power Season 3 can reach new heights for the series. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to all my Patreon and YouTube supporters who make this channel possible. CCDC Red Team, Evil Chameleon, Tom DeBombadil 19, Lissamy the Cinda, Rabbi Rob Thomas, Charles Leisure, Joe Tepper, The Mighty Mim, Andrew Carlisle, Swirled Traveler, Matthew Jeffrey, Viking Lord, Alvin Einbert, Jeremy Daniel Derby, Madame Director, Freya Firestar, Chris and Meg Q, Jason Cummings, Leo Vittori, Sky Carcass, Slide Belts, Dane Ragnarsson, Berto Berg, Graham Derricott, The Dark-Haired One, Wyland, Kiara Berlin, Z and N, Evely, Kia, Landry Quinn Walker, Ice Glazer, Levi Olden, The Last Valorakar, and Kalasor, Micah Wu, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description to purchase prints of their great work for yourself. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.